Political power is shifting. That's after the 2020 census data came out. 6 states gained seats while 7 states lost seats. The House of Representatives seeing minor shakeups as a result. 7 House Republicans are pushing back against big tech's monopolistic powers by not accepting campaign donations. This comes as a nonprofit project found big tech broke its own records in political spending during the 2020 election cycle. And the CDC's guideline for children as young as 2 years old to wear masks is raising issue with some lawmakers. They note the CDC's guideline is the strictest in the world. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Lots of updates about masks, to wear or not to wear. But first, seats are shifting in the House of Representatives. The data from the 2020 census is out, and there are some shakeups in the Electoral College and House. The 435 House seats are distributed among the states based on population. That impacts the number of electoral votes each state gets as well. 6 states gained seats, 7 lost seats. The states that gained seats are Texas, Colorado, Florida, Montana, North Carolina, and Oregon. Several are considered Republican strongholds. Former President Trump won 5 of these states in the 2020 election. Notably, Texas is getting not 1 but 2 seats. That's how many people it gained as people moved from the north. The 7 that lost seats are California, Illinois, Michigan, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. They have to wait till the next census in 10 years to see if they win back seats. California lost a House seat for the first time in its 170-year history. California is still the most populous state by far, but it's growing more slowly than other states. New York also lost a seat. It was shy by just 89 residents. Overall, the U.S. population rose to over 331 million. That's a 7.4% increase from 2010, the second slowest growth rate ever. The U.S. Census Bureau released the 2020 data on Monday after months of delays because of the pandemic. Every state uses the census data to redraw lines both for districts and state seats. The process is known as redistricting. That work requires more precise block-by-block data, which the census is expected to release in September. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 2019 that federal courts have no power to restrict political gerrymandering, although racial gerrymandering remains unlawful. That's when the goal is to curb the political power of specific racial or ethnic groups. Now, before we touch on masks and the back and forth on that topic, let's talk big tech. 7 House Republicans are rejecting donations from big tech. The top Republican on the House Antitrust panel, Representative Ken Buck, is leading the 7 House GOP members in the Pledge for America. Rolled out earlier this week, the goal is to stay away from campaign donations from the likes of Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, and Twitter. According to a report by nonprofit consumer advocacy group Public Citizen, these companies are among the biggest contributors to political campaigns and lobbying spenders in the country. The report found big tech broke its own records during the 2020 election cycle, spending a whopping $124 million in lobbying and campaign contributions. Most of that came from Amazon and Facebook. The report noted from 2018 to 2020, Amazon increased spending by 30%, while Facebook added an astounding 56% to its Washington investment. So why are these 7 House Republicans pushing back? They say in the statement that they firmly believe in the free market and the free exchange of ideas. They say the likes of Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, and Twitter have reached monopoly status and thus violate their convictions. The 7 are Representatives Chip Roy of Texas, Greg Stoiber of Florida, Ralph Norman of South Carolina, Dan Bishop of North Carolina, Burgess Owens of Utah, and Andy Biggs of Arizona. They go on to note, in the business sphere, each one of these companies has used their monopoly power to stifle innovation and destroy competitors. For example, Google removed itself from consideration for U.S. Department of Defense contracts worth $10 billion, citing that U.S. military projects contradict its corporate values, but then collaborated with the Chinese government to develop a censored version of the Google search engine called the Dragonfly experiment. They go on to raise concerns with many of these companies' practices, noting these companies are also now deserting the country that provided them the legal, commercial, and social environment to grow and thrive, and are vigorously courting the communist Chinese regime in hopes of accessing cheap labor and a virtually limitless customer base. Additionally, Apple's supply chain is deeply integrated in China through its partnerships with Chinese device manufacturers that allegedly use Uyghur slave labor in their iPhone factories. Apple has actively lobbied the U.S. government against legislation that would require U.S. companies to guarantee they are not employing Uyghur slave labor. Democrats, meanwhile, say there is little evidence behind these accusations. Now, speaking of the pushback against big tech's monopolistic power, Senator Josh Hawley recently introduced two antitrust bills taking aim at big tech platforms. One is called Bust a Big Tech Act. This would ban Amazon and Google from running an online marketplace and selling goods on that marketplace at the same time. Hawley said in a tweet the practice allows Amazon to destroy its competitors. He writes, no one company should be able to control e-commerce and privilege its own products on the same platform and control the cloud, adding Amazon should be broken up. The other is called Trust Busting for the 21st Century Act. That would target other antitrust issues surrounding big tech. Notably, it would bar mergers and acquisitions by firms that have a market capitalization of more than $100 billion. Now, let's turn to masks. As the weather begins to get warmer, what about summer camps? The CDC set out new guidelines saying its summer camp guidance aligns with its evidence for social distancing at schools, with at least 3 feet between children and at least 6 feet when eating and drinking. The CDC goes on to say camp counselors and other adults should stay at least 6 feet away from children and each other, that summer camp activities should be held outdoors as much as possible, and if they are indoors, doors and windows should be left open. As for group events and large gatherings, those should be avoided. Now, speaking of children, members of Congress are asking why the CDC is recommending children as young as 2 years old should wear masks. The CDC first recommended such a move in March of 2020. This January, Biden signed an executive order so that all airports, trains, and many buses would follow the CDC's mask recommendations. The bicameral group of legislators wrote to the CDC's director, saying the implementation of these recommendations has had serious consequences for some Americans. Multiple parents of young children have been removed from flights, and in some instances permanently banned from future travel on the airline they were flying due to their toddler's refusal to wear a mask. Adding these unfortunate events have occurred despite the parents' best attempts to have their child cooperate with the mask requirement, which is a struggle millions of parents have faced this past year. For parents of children with disabilities, compliance have proved almost impossible, resulting in increased social isolation and negative mental health consequences. How does the CDC's advice compare to other agencies? The lawmakers go on to note in the letter, in a number of European countries, children under 11 years old do not have to wear masks. They go on to say both scientists and studies have repeatedly noted the lower rates of COVID-19 infection and transmission among young children. Given that evidence, they asked the CDC director to provide the basis for the CDC's recommendation and asked if there were plans to update its recommendation on mask wearing as new information comes up. 32 Republican lawmakers signed the letter. Now, since those guidelines could differ among vaccinated and non-vaccinated, let's turn to vaccines. As of April 23rd, more than 91 million Americans have been fully vaccinated against the virus in America. Fully vaccinated refers to people who received their second Moderna or Pfizer dose or their single-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine 2 or more weeks prior. Not everyone has gotten their second shot, though. The CDC says nearly 8% of vaccinated people, nearly a tenth, are missing their second dose of either the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine. About 140 million have gotten at least one dose, putting the number of vaccines missed in the millions. Is one shot enough? Oxford University has studied the protection of just one dose. They recently found that one dose of the Pfizer vaccine offered 65% protection against COVID-19 symptoms. That's not as strong as 2 doses, but still counts as significant protection. But some fully vaccinated people are still contracting the virus. The CDC calls them breakthrough cases. For most of the breakthrough cases, 64% took place among women, while 46% were among people 60 years old or above. Nearly 500 of those who contracted COVID-19 despite being fully vaccinated required hospital care, though about a third of them were hospitalized for illnesses deemed unrelated to the virus. 88 of the breakthrough patients, or 1%, died. 11 of the deaths were reported as not showing symptoms or being unrelated to the disease. The state-by-state breakdown of the cases has not been made public. A spokesperson for the CDC says the agency expects thousands of breakthrough cases to occur, saying vaccine breakthrough infections make up a small percentage of people who are fully vaccinated. The CDC recommends that all eligible people get a COVID-19 vaccine as soon as one is available to them. Adding, the CDC also continues to recommend people who have been fully vaccinated should keep taking precautions in public places, like wearing a mask, staying at least 6 feet apart from others, avoiding crowds in poorly ventilated spaces, and washing their hands often. The CDC says it is monitoring reported breakthrough cases to see if there's clustering by demographics, geographic location, time since vaccination, vaccine type, and virus lineage. Plans for the future include investigating only the breakthrough cases that result in hospitalization or death. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.